Well, I have a confession to make. I filmed this entire video this morning without my microphone. So I'm gonna try to make this work because it turned out so well. This is a great recipe and I want to share it with you, and I don't have any more ingredients. I used everything. So we're gonna see how this goes today. Welcome to Garden Preserve. I'm Carter. I'm so glad you're here today. So what we've done today is strawberry mango jam. I'm gonna walk you through step by step because this is a good recipe. So this is from the Pomona's Pectin cookbook. This is strawberry mango jam on page 64. So I just finished this maybe 3 or 4 hours ago, so I really shouldn't be handling this. It's still warm, so I don't want to jostle it around too much. But it is a beautiful jam. It's very opaque, very thick. It is so tasty. I had just a little bit left over and it is absolutely divine. So the recipe calls for 1 pound of strawberries, 2 pounds of fully ripe mangoes. Well, I had some strawberries that I had picked up from the grocery store the other day. They had a special on organic strawberries. I was feeling kind of sorry for myself because a bunny had eaten most of our strawberries this year. So I got a couple of packs of strawberries, got those sliced up. We had a few, but I had plenty that I could use to make something else. And then I also, if you'll remember, recently we did the Caribbean pork canning project, and that used 3 mangoes out of a Costco size box, which comes with 5 mangoes. So I had 2 mangoes left over that were now ripe, and I needed to find some way to preserve those and not let those go bad. So I had all the makings for something strawberry, something mango, but I didn't necessarily have enough of either to do an individual mango project or an individual strawberry project. And I couldn't believe it when I opened this book and found a strawberry mango jam. So that was very exciting, and this is what you're gonna do, Carter. My mangoes and my strawberries, neither were at a ripe enough consistency to be able to mash easily. So I'm gonna put my just over 2 cups of strawberries and just over 2 cups of mango into the pan, and we're gonna turn on the heat and start mashing it up a bit. And you'll see that I gave it probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes of some mashing, and it starts to break down. Particularly the strawberries start to break down. The mango was a little bit reluctant to break down. Now, if you do this recipe the way it's written in the book, you're gonna start with a mash, and you're not gonna have all this time on the stovetop waiting to get it to the right consistency to start adding the other ingredients. But I ended up having to do all of that mashing work while it was on the stovetop, so mine took a little bit longer. So as you'll see here in just a minute, I end up bringing in power tools to get the mash going, and that really did an excellent job breaking it up for me. So now what I'm gonna do, now that I'm completely mashed up and everything is ready to go, I'm going to take this out and measure it, because initially the recipe wanted me to have 2 cups of mashed mango and 2 cups of mashed strawberry. Now that I have them mixed together, I'm gonna make sure that I have 4 cups total. And you want exactly 4 cups total because that is how the pectin is measured for this recipe. It needs exactly 4 cups of the fruit puree. So it turns out, as you can see here, I have just a little bit more than 4 cups. So that just gives me a little extra to taste, which is fantastic. Okay, so now that I have my exact 4 cups of fruit puree in the pot, now I can add my lemon juice and my calcium water. So the recipe says I need 3 teaspoons of calcium water. So this is a Pomona's Pectin recipe. Pomona's Pectin is a low sugar or no sugar pectin, so it does not require sugar to set. So most regular pectins, and where you're putting in 7 cups or 4 cups or 5 cups or whatever of sugar in a little jelly recipe, it needs all that sugar to set. Pomona's Pectin does not set because of the sugar, it sets because of the calcium water. And when you buy a package of Pomona's Pectin, it comes with a much smaller packet of calcium. So it is the calcium water that the pectin needs to set, not the sugar. So that makes Pomona's Pectin the perfect pectin, in my opinion, for folks who are trying to cut way back on or completely cut out sugar. So it works for us. I use it all the time. I have been using it for several years now, and very rarely do I have anything that doesn't set. And that's one of the things we ought to talk about, particularly with this one, because I know that a lot of folks are, new canners. You don't necessarily start with jams and jellies early on in your canning because folks are afraid, well, what if it doesn't set? And then I've wasted all that time, I've wasted all that product, but you haven't. There's such an easy fix to an unset jam, jelly, preserves. And the only thing you have to do is change the label on the top of the lid. I mean, literally. So it's not a jelly anymore, it's a syrup. It's not a jam or preserves or anything. It is a smoothie mix. It is a yogurt topper. It is, it's blueberry syrup for pancakes or something. It's just, you have not lost the product. You haven't lost the time. You haven't lost anything. You're just going to change how you use that product. So don't worry about that. Don't let that stop you from making, jams and jellies. Don't let that stop you from trying something with Pomona's pectin and getting rid of some of the sugar in your life. It just shouldn't be a concern at all, because there is always a use for those delicious sweet things. So don't worry about this. Okay, so let's get our pectin and sugar mixture created, because we want to make sure that the pectin is completely mixed in with whatever sugar or sugar-like product you are using, because if it hits the hot puree, it is going to clump up unless it is completely mixed in with the sugar. So the recipe calls for 1 cup of sugar. I am using allulose in my house because that's what we use, but it calls for 1 cup of sugar. It also calls for 2.5 teaspoons of pectin. So I'm going to add my 1 cup of allulose, and then I'm going to mix in 2.5 teaspoons of pectin, get that thoroughly mixed up so that it will be ready to go once my puree has come back up to a boil. Then I'm going to pour in the sugar and pectin mixture just very slowly, and we're going to keep stirring continuously, and it'll probably take a couple of minutes to get all of the sugar and pectin mixture in and bring that pot back up to a full boil. Now you want to be careful on this one because it is a very thick product, so when it bubbles, it's probably also going to splatter. So just watch your arms and hands as you get too close to the pot. You don't want to get hit with the hot liquid. Okay, so I think we're just about there. I've had my jars in the steam canner, so they have been getting hot, getting sterilized, so they are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get those out, bring them over, and we will start loading the jars. Now, this recipe makes 4 to 5 half pints. So what I have in my steam canner getting ready is 5 half pints and 1 quarter pint. So whatever final amount I end up with, whether I get 4 half pints, 5 half pints, or 4.5 half pints, I'm covered and I'm ready for it. And then any little bit left over will just be the cook's treat, because that's the way it goes. All right, so we're going to load these up. All we need is a 1/4-inch headspace. So I've got the first 4 out here. I use a measuring cup really to get this out. It's much easier than a spoon and a ladle dripping and being too large. And anyway, a measuring cup I find works really, really well for me, especially with these tiny little jars. So I'm gonna fill these up. They're looking good, quarter inch head space. It's looking like I can get another full half pint. So I'm gonna pull one of those out, and it looks like we're gonna get 5 half pints of this, and I'm really excited because it is really tasty. It tastes like a smoothie mix. It really does. Or put it on top of, you know, ice cream or yogurt. I'm almost hoping it doesn't set because I think those would just be tremendous uses for it. It would be great on like buttered toast. I think it would be terrific. I'm not sure it works as well like with a peanut butter jelly kind of sandwich, but it's delicious. I think you're gonna love it. Okay, so this is a water bath recipe. So if you are using a regular water bath canner, you want to fill up your water, get it hot, heat your jars, etc. And you want the water to cover the jar completely, and then by another at least an inch. You know, I generally do another 2 inches just because, you know, so much of it is going to evaporate off as the steam comes billowing out. I'm going to use the steam canner, so it's very similar in directions, but not exactly the same. So water bath canning directions. You would put the jars in, wait for that steam to come pouring out of your canner. I mean, really pouring out. You want a full rolling boil in there. Then you're going to set your timer for 10 minutes. At the end of 10 minutes, you're going to turn off the burner, take off the lid, and let it sit for another 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to tell you about the steam canner next, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about why you might need to adjust these times for your own situation. So with the steam canner, it's a little bit different. I'm going to steam it once it comes up to the dark green line on my steamer. There's a measure in there, a dial in there that tells me when it is ready to go and ready for me to start timing. I will steam can it for 10 minutes at that point, and then at the end of 10 minutes, I will turn off the heat, but I'm going to leave the lid on. I'm going to set another timer for 5 minutes, and I'm going to let it sit with the lid on for another 5 minutes. And then I can take the lid off and take them out and start the cooling process. All right, so let's talk for just a minute about why your times may be different than anything you read in a book or online or hear from somebody on YouTube. So my altitude, standing in my kitchen, using my phone, checking my altitude, is 614 feet above sea level. So I am well within the under 1,000. So I'm going to use the directions exactly as they are written in a book. So if it says process for 10 minutes, I'm going to process it for 10 minutes. If your altitude is above 1,000, you're going to need to process for a different amount of time. So let's say that your altitude is 1,089 feet above sea level. You're going to need to process yours for 15 minutes and then turn off the burner after that, let it sit for 5, and the rest is just as usual. There's another break, I think, at 3,000, maybe another break at 5,000. But in all of my canning videos, I have a link down in the show notes below that will take you to an altitude chart. So that'll tell you how you need to adjust your time in water bath canning and how you need to adjust your pressure in pressure canning, because you will need to make those adjustments. So let me give you one example that I hope is going to make you go stand in your kitchen and check your altitude right there. In Atlanta, if you look up the altitude of Atlanta, I think it's like 950 feet above sea level. Well, I lived in 3 houses in Atlanta as an adult canner. So in one house, I was 966 feet above sea level. So that's fine. I'm still under 1,000, so I just would go with the 10 minutes on this one. Then I moved to another house, and I was 1,002 feet above sea level. Okay, so we're right close to the line there, but I'm over 1,000, so I had to add 5 minutes. And it took some getting used to, I gotta tell you. And I had to go up to 15 pounds of pressure. So that was a change I had to make even just for those 2 feet. And then I moved to another house, kind of the last house we were in before we left Atlanta, and that one was like 1,026 feet above sea level. So I stayed with that, you know, add 5 minutes to the time on water bath and add 5 pounds of pressure to pressure canning directions. So that is something you always need to make sure you know exactly where you are. So literally when I say go stand in your kitchen with your iPhone, and I'll put a link to the name of the website, I think it is. If I can, I'm sure I'll be able to find it again. So I'll put a link to that down below, and just stand there and click on that link, and you find out what your altitude is right there where you're canted, right? So there's no question. Especially if you're right kind of near that line. You could be 997 feet above sea level, or you could be 1,002 feet above sea level. And it makes a big difference in where you ought to be processing. So that's my little speech about that. Okay, so everything is now done and looking beautiful. And I have to tell you, the little bit that was left to taste was absolutely fantastic. I don't know. I thought it was great. It was not like anything I've canned before. And it's kind of a fun thing to do while the strawberries are out fresh, the mangoes are out and fresh. It had never occurred to me to do a jam like this before. So I hope that you are going to try it. I hope you're going to love it. I apologize. It was kind of a wacky setup on the video, and I had to do so much editing. But I hope that it works, and I thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.